Hello, podheads, and welcome back to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. I am your host today, Holly Lamoureux.
This is Kate Carter.
And I'm Kylie Colwell.
So today, for my case, we're just gonna jump straight in. There are certain moments that immediately set off alarm bells in a missing persons case. One of the biggest is when someone who is known for being dependable suddenly disappears without warning. The kind of employee who is always on time, the person who never misses work, never calls in sick, simply doesn't show up. So, when that person suddenly becomes a no call, no show, the people who know them best immediately realize that something is wrong. That brings us to January 23rd, 2006. 24-year-old Jennifer Kesse was living what most people would describe as her dream life. She had recently earned a promotion at the timeshare company that she worked at as a project manager, a job she genuinely enjoyed, and she had worked incredibly hard to achieve this promotion. And not long before that, Jennifer had reached another major milestone. She had purchased her very first home. It was a condominium in Orlando, Florida, located inside a gated community with security at the entrance. Feeling safe was important to Jennifer, and it was one of the biggest reasons that she chose this particular complex. She was naturally cautious and always aware of her surroundings. In fact, she rarely went anywhere without carrying pepper spray. Just days before she disappeared, life could not be going better for her. Jennifer had just returned from a vacation with her boyfriend, Rob, and the two had been dating for about a year now, although their relationship was kind of long distance at this point because Rob lived in Fort Lauderdale while Jennifer was in Orlando. So it's not too far. I don't know. You guys live in Florida. How far is that?
I would say with traffic, maybe 4 hours.
Okay. So they're definitely long distance, but it's not terrible. Like they spent nearly every weekend together. So they're just doing the drive, not like cross country or anything crazy. According to Jennifer's family, she came home from that trip happier than they had seen her in a long time. Her mother later recalled Jennifer calling her after they got back, excitedly walking her through every detail of the vacation. She couldn't stop talking about it. By all accounts, she was on cloud nine. Everything seemed to be falling into place, which is why what happens next made so little sense. When Jennifer failed to show up for work that Monday morning, her boss immediately knew that something wasn't right. This wasn't like Jennifer. She wasn't someone who overslept, she wasn't someone who forgot to call, and she certainly wasn't someone who just would disappear. Concerned, Jennifer's boss began calling her phone. When there was no answer, coworkers started reaching out to her friends and family to see if anyone had heard from her. One by one, they all tried calling. Nothing. No answer, no return calls, no explanation. And in that moment, the people who knew Jennifer best all came to the same frightening conclusion. Something was terribly wrong. Jennifer's family wasn't ready to assume the worst, but they also weren't willing to sit around and wait. So they drove towards Jennifer's condo. They start calling local hospitals, making sure that she hadn't been involved in an accident and simply hadn't been identified yet. No one had her. When they arrived at the condo, they found the building manager and explained the situation. Jennifer's condo was locked, so the manager unlocked the door and let them inside. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Remember, Jennifer had just gotten back home from her vacation with Rob, so her suitcase is like still sitting where she had left it, like kind of by the door, completely unpacked, which, like, obviously, she got back the night before. She has to go to work the next day. It's probably like a hectic Monday. So her suitcase is just sitting there. But the rest of the condo looked exactly like Jennifer had left it for the vacation. Everything was neat, everything organized, tidy, nothing looked ransacked or disturbed. The only room that looked even remotely messy was her bathroom. And honestly, just like every girl's bathroom, there's just like getting ready stuff everywhere. You got like products on the counter, her curling iron was out, her hair products covered the vanity, towels tossed around. So in other words, it looked completely normal. This is normal for her. She's getting ready, she's going to work. Also, remember, she's probably had all of her crap packed up, and so she's like trying to like get her life together on this Monday. So nothing ransacked or disturbed other than the bathroom. But nothing about the condo suggested that she had been in a struggle or that Jennifer had left in a huge hurry. Like, left town in a huge hurry. If anything, it looked like she had simply gotten ready for work that morning, walked out the front door, and then disappeared. There were, however, a few things missing from Jennifer's condo: her purse, her keys, and her cell phone. Arguably the most important and telling things. Based on what they found inside the apartment, Jennifer's family began piecing together what they believed happened to her that morning. Jennifer had clearly made it home from vacation with Rob the night before. She tossed her suitcase inside, gone to bed, and left it packed. The next morning, she likely woke up, got ready for work, and tried to get back into her normal routine after being away for a few days. She showered, did her hair, put on her makeup, and locked the front door behind her. Because remember, the landlord had to open, or the manager of the condo complex had to open her door. So it was locked. And somewhere between leaving her condo and arriving at work, she vanished. That was the family's theory based on everything that they had found inside of her home. While police began looking into Jennifer's disappearance, her youngest brother, Logan, took it upon himself to start asking questions around the condominium complex. At the time, several units were under construction, and there were numerous workers coming and going every day. Logan tried speaking with some of them, but later said they were surprisingly uncooperative. He couldn't explain exactly why, but he walked away with the feeling that some of them knew more than they were saying. Whether that instinct was right or wrong, it stayed with him. At the same time, Jennifer's family was becoming increasingly frustrated with the pace of the investigation. From their perspective, law enforcement didn't seem to be treating Jennifer's disappearance with the urgency that it deserved. Initially, investigators weren't convinced Jennifer met the criteria to be considered a missing person under the suspicious circumstances. Instead, they floated around another possibility. Maybe she had simply left after an argument with her boyfriend. There was one reason investigators considered that theory at first, and that was because the night before Jennifer disappeared, she and Rob had spoken on the phone at around 10 o'clock, and the conversation hadn't ended on the best note. So, like many couples in their long-distance relationship, they always had minor disagreements, and the distance had kind of started taking toll on their relationship a little bit. Jennifer had been feeling emotional. According to Rob, she questioned whether he still loved her. She expressed some insecurities about living so far apart, but it wasn't like a major fight. It was just kind of like a small disagreement. It wasn't unusual, but tragically, Rob had no way of knowing that it would be the last conversation that he would have with Jennifer. Whether investigators focused on that disagreement or whether they simply believed Jennifer hadn't been missing long enough to raise serious concern, the family felt police were looking in the wrong direction. By early evening, with still no sign of Jennifer, investigators officially classified her as missing. But even then, the family and police found themselves at odds over one critical question: when did Jennifer actually disappear? Based on the condition of her condo, her family believed Jennifer had gone through her normal morning routine before leaving for work, but investigators developed a very different theory. After reviewing early cell phone tower information, police believe Jennifer may have left her condo sometime during the night. The data appeared to suggest that her phone had connected to towers away from her apartment, leading investigators to consider the possibility that she had voluntarily gone somewhere before disappearing. The problem was, that theory didn't sound anything like Jennifer. By every account, she was cautious, she was aware of her surroundings, she carries pepper spray with her everywhere she goes. Her family couldn't imagine that Jennifer just decided to leave her condo alone in the middle of the night for no apparent reason. So even walking through the dark parking lot made her uneasy. So she would call her mom if she's, walking out of a store and it's dark outside. So they are we can't imagine her leaving in the middle of the night and just going off. That simply wasn't Jennifer, and eventually investigators discovered that the family had been right. After taking a closer look, investigators realized that the original cell phone tower data had been misinterpreted. Jennifer's phone had not shown that she had left her apartment during the night at all, which brought investigators right back to where her family had been from the very beginning. Whatever happened to Jennifer most likely happened after she got ready for work and walked out her front door that Monday morning. As the hours stretched on with no sign of her, the Kesse family's concern turned into outright panic. Every minute that passed felt like another minute slipping away. Jennifer's condo quickly became the family's command center, and from there they launched their own media campaign, contacting local news outlets, organizing volunteers, and doing everything that they could to keep Jennifer's face in the public eye. Hundreds of people answered the call. Friends, neighbors, complete strangers joined search efforts, combing through nearby neighborhoods and hanging missing person flyers on telephone poles, storefronts, and street corners, everywhere that someone might see Jennifer's face. Law enforcement was still searching as well. Investigators canvassed the area, interviewed potential witnesses, and searched for anything that could explain what happened after Jennifer left for work that Monday morning. And then, just 2 days into the investigation, they got their first real break. Jennifer's car had been found. The discovery was actually connected to a tip that police had received almost immediately after Jennifer disappeared. A couple had contacted investigators to report something unusual that they witnessed that morning that Jennifer vanished. It was around 7:40 a.m. when the couple called in saying that they saw a black Chevrolet Malibu leaving Jennifer's condo. What caught their attention wasn't the car itself, it was the way that it was being driven. According to witnesses, it appeared that the vehicle was swerving, almost as if two people were fighting over control of the steering wheel. Unfortunately, by the time the car reached the main road, they had lost sight of it, so they couldn't tell the dispatcher which direction that it turned. So this kind of leaves police with like little place to start of where like they know that there was a car that matched Jennifer's car description, but they don't even know which direction it's going. So investigators had begun searching nearby neighborhoods, hoping that someone else had seen the vehicle or it had simply been abandoned somewhere close by. That was when the Orange County Sheriff's Office received another call. Jennifer's Malibu had been located at the Huntington on the Green condominium complex. This is roughly 1 mile from her own complex, so just another condo down the road. The location immediately raised concerns because this wasn't somewhere that Jennifer was known to visit. In fact, investigators were familiar with the complex for an entirely different reason. It had kind of developed a reputation as a place where stolen vehicles were frequently abandoned and never recovered. Jennifer's car had just been sitting there, just a mile from home, but for whatever answers it held, they were still locked inside. As investigators processed Jennifer's car, they made an unexpected decision. This is kind of weird. They asked Jennifer's boyfriend, Rob, to meet them at the scene of her car. Strange request, and Rob lives like 200 miles away in Fort Lauderdale. He wasn't even with her when she disappeared, but he's going to drive back down there, be with police when they open her car.
I don't understand why they're asking for him to do that. I mean, maybe that's a way for them to like get him into town
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing and see how he acts.
The theory of why police are doing this is because I think that they were initially suspecting that Rob had something to do with the disappearance, and they wanted to see what his reaction was. Like they wanted to watch them open the car and see how he reacted, or if he even showed up in the first place, I guess. Like, did you have something to do with it and you're not gonna, do that? Rob comes, they observe his reaction as they open the car. They open the trunk, and thankfully, she wasn't in it. And she wasn't anywhere in the car. When they searched the vehicle, they found no signs that a violent struggle had taken place. In fact, almost everything looked exactly as it should. Jennifer's cell phone charger was still inside, her shoes and sandals were in the car, but nothing appeared to have been tossed around or pilfered through. The vehicle didn't look like it had anything stolen out of it. It didn't resemble a typical carjacking. If anything, it looked like someone had simply driven the car there, parked it, and walked away. Investigators immediately locked down the area. They began canvassing the condominium complex, knocking on doors and asking if residents had seen Jennifer or recognized anyone who may have parked that vehicle there. As the days passed, the search only intensified. Volunteers flooded the area. Law enforcement expanded their efforts using mounted units, helicopters, and additional officers, hoping that someone had seen something. But despite the massive search effort, investigators came up empty-handed. No one reported seeing Jennifer, and no one remembered watching someone abandon that car. Then police check all the surveillance footage cameras. and for a brief moment, it looked like they had finally caught the break that they had been waiting for. Security footage captured Jennifer's Malibu arriving at the Huntington on the Green condominium complex around noon on the day she disappeared. The video shows an unknown person driving Jennifer's car into the parking lot before pulling into the space near the community pool. The driver doesn't simply park and leave. Instead, they back up, straighten the car up into the parking space, and carefully reposition it, as if taking the extra moment to make sure it looked perfectly normal. They then sit inside the vehicle for about 30 seconds. And finally, the person steps out, closes the door, and just calmly walks away. They never look back. They don't appear to be in a hurry. They don't run. They simply disappear on foot, walking in the general direction of Jennifer's condominium. Jennifer's family would say that seeing that tape of Jennifer's car, that was probably the worst moment. It was like being hit with a ton of bricks and then anger. Just anger because the person was so casual. Something obviously really bad had just happened, and they so casually dropped the car off. It's one of the eeriest moments in the entire case. The investigators are looking at the likely abductor. But there's a but coming, because it always comes with a catch. Unfortunately, that hope didn't last long, because the surveillance footage captured the person who abandoned Jennifer's car, but it didn't capture their face. And the reason why almost seems impossible. The security camera wasn't recording continuous video. Instead, it's like capturing like still images like every 2 to 3 seconds. As the person walked along the sidewalk beside the pool fence, each image was taken at just the wrong moment every single time. When the camera snapped to frame, the person's face was almost perfectly hidden behind one of the fence posts. So 2 seconds later, another image is captured, and once again, the face is concealed by the next post on the fence. Frame after frame, the same thing happened over and over. What are the odds that someone would walk across the entire camera's field of view and never have their face visible a single time? But somehow that's exactly what happened. Investigators could estimate the person's height, build, and the clothes that they were wearing, but they couldn't identify who it was. They were also able to kind of look at the person's gait, which was like the cadence at which they walk, but not as good as it would as if it was like a continuous video. Despite the years of advances in technology, including repeated attempts to enhance the footage, no one has ever been able to reveal the face hidden behind those fence posts. So it remains very frustrating and infamous surveillance video, like low emphasis on the word video. Investigators may have captured the person responsible on camera despite that. With no clear image of the suspect's face, Jennifer's family refused to give up. They still printed hundreds of the photographs taken from the surveillance video and handed them out everywhere that they could. Maybe someone would recognize the person's walk, their posture, hairstyle, the clothes that they were wearing. Maybe someone had seen someone in that exact outfit that day, or maybe they would be able to recognize the gait of the walk, the condominium complex, or small details that the investigators had overlooked. But despite the widespread publicity, no one came forward with any identification. Even so, investigators were able to gather a few details from the footage. Based on the person's stride and body proportions, they believe that the suspect was likely a man, as we know. The FBI later concluded its own analysis, and they agreed with local investigators' estimate that the individual was somewhere between 3 feet. 3 feet. He's very small. He's a very tiny man. The suspect stood somewhere between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 5 inches tall. Investigators also noted that for someone of that height, the person appeared to have unusually large feet. Then there was the clothing. The suspect appeared to be wearing what looked like a painter's uniform or like work clothes.
Didn't you say the complex was had construction going on?
It did. It did.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that's my next sentence. She's always one step ahead. And that detail immediately caught investigators' attention, and Kylie's. Because remember, Jennifer's condo was in the middle of extensive renovations. Construction crews had been working throughout the property for weeks. In fact, Jennifer had mentioned those workers to her family before she disappeared. She told her family that they made her uncomfortable. According to Jennifer, some of the workers would stop what they were doing whenever she walked by. Others would stare as she walked to and from her car. It was unsettling enough that she had mentioned it more than once. Whether those encounters were connected to her disappearance was impossible to know, but investigators certainly couldn't ignore the possibility. Unfortunately, another obstacle quickly emerged. By the time detectives began interviewing construction workers, many of them were already gone. Some had finished their jobs and moved on to other work sites. Others reportedly left the area altogether. Because many of the laborers were believed to be like undocumented immigrants, investigators considered the possibility that the increased police presence simply frightened them away. So they're like just disappearing and there's really no record to know like who they were and how to track them down, unfortunately. Or maybe they were disappearing for another reason altogether. At that point, detectives couldn't say. Investigators then turned their attention back to Jennifer's own condominium complex, hoping their surveillance camera footage might show her leaving for work that morning. But there's another setback because there weren't any cameras, of course. Instead, the gated community relied on a security guard who was supposed to maintain handwritten logs of every visitor entering and leaving the property, including names and license plate numbers. I don't know how reliable that would be. Just someone sitting there and writing that down. I bet they're sleeping in that thing.
Right. And I feel like we're in enough technology in this day and time.
Yeah.
You have security videos. That's not, especially a gated community.
Yeah, like okay, instead of paying a person to sit in that, it was like one of those condos that has like the little like thing out front, like a security guard sitting in that little like house thing, which I, by the way, I always thought would be like the best job ever. Like you just sit there. I bet you're just sitting there watching Netflix. Instead of paying someone to do that, get a security camera. Not to like let technology take everybody's jobs, but like that seems really stupid. Okay, it's not my property, so okay, I'll mind my own business. So, when detectives reviewed these handwritten records, they discovered the logs appeared to be incomplete. Shocker. Another potential source of evidence gone. And then investigators realized that they had another problem. Jennifer's condo itself had never been secured as the potential crime scene, a problem of their own creation. By the time law enforcement treated the case as suspicious, Jennifer's family, friends, and others had already been inside the condo searching for clues. Remember, they kind of set that up as like the searchers' like hub. There's been people in and out of this condo. Total, roughly 14 people had entered and exited the complex because that's the police's job to secure the scene. No commentary on that. Like, I literally have nothing else to say. It seems like every episode, this is the problem. So, unfortunately, Jennifer's car didn't provide investigators with much of a breakthrough. When forensic teams processed the vehicle, they found no usable fingerprints on the steering wheel. Investigators had long believed that there was a simple explanation for that. The surveillance video, going back to that, after parking Jennifer's car, the unidentified person remained inside for about 30 seconds before getting out and walking away. So police are like, that's more than enough time for him to wipe down the steering wheel, wipe down like the things you touch, the rear view mirror, the gear shift, anything touchable. And they think that's probably what he was doing because you would find some fingerprints on a steering wheel. Jennifer's at the least.
Yeah. No, he definitely wiped shut, or she.
Crime scene technicians also vacuumed different areas of the vehicle, collecting trace evidence from each section, hoping that there was hair, fibers, DNA, literally anything. The samples were sent to a laboratory for analysis, but once again, nothing. No usable DNA, no forensic evidence that could potentially identify who had driven Jennifer's car. As the months turned into years, investigators continued chasing leads. But every trail seemed to end the same way, with nothing. It's crazy because like we talk about all the time, we're like, you cannot commit a murder nowadays without leaving something behind. But like sometimes it does. Like every now and then it does just happen. I mean, I know he's like wiping down DNA and stuff, but like I guess a hair didn't fall out of his head.
He's got that like full-on painter suit on.
True.
Some of those have like the hood. Sterilize yourself, basically.
What if he was bald?
Yeah. Maybe he's bald. It'd be like that sometimes.
It'd be like that.
As the months turned into years, investigators continued chasing leads, but every trail seemed to end the same way, with nothing. Slowly, the investigation began to grow cold. Still, Jennifer's family refused to let people forget. On the second anniversary of her disappearance, In 2008, family members and friends gathered once again on the street corner in Orlando. They held photographs and signs bearing Jennifer's face. They stood where passing drivers couldn't help but see them. It was the same thing that they had done in those first desperate days after Jennifer vanished. Their hope hadn't changed, but maybe today would be the day that someone finally recognized something. Maybe someone would finally come forward. Then, in 2009, the investigation took an unexpected turn. Detective Wright was assigned to take a fresh look at Jennifer's case. Rather than assuming every lead had already been exhausted, he started from the beginning, re interviewing witnesses and looking for anything that could have been overlooked. One of those people was a former housekeeper who had worked at Jennifer's condominium complex. Surprisingly, despite all the years that had passed, she had never been interviewed during the original investigation. During her interview, Detective Wright showed her the now famous surveillance image of the unidentified person who parked Jennifer's car. She studied it for a moment before offering something that investigators hadn't heard before. She said, "That looks like Chino." She couldn't say for certain that it was him, but she told detectives that the person's walk, the clothing, the hairstyle, okay, well, guess he's got hair, and overall appearance reminded her of a man that she knew who worked around the complex, a maintenance worker everyone knew called Chino. The name immediately caught Detective Wright's attention. As he dug deeper, he learned that Chino had once lived in another building within Jennifer's complex. He also worked maintenance there. In fact, he had performed work inside Jennifer's own condo just 1 week before she disappeared, which isn't weird for a maintenance person, but there was another discovery that was even more frustrating. When Detective Wright entered the name Chino into the department's lead tracking system, an old tip surfaced. So this is like a database where they keep track of their tips on crimes, investigations, things like that. And when he types in Chino, an anonymous crime lab tip that had been received during the very first week of Jennifer's disappearance came up. The caller suggested that Chino might have been involved. Yet it was unclear whether investigators had ever followed up on that information or whether they had interviewed him at all. At that moment, it finally felt like the investigation was gaining some real momentum, and locating Chino wasn't difficult because by then he was already serving time in a Florida prison after being convicted of statutory rape involving a teenage girl, a crime committed roughly 2 years after Jennifer's disappeared. For Detective Wright, that conviction didn't prove Chino had anything to do with Jennifer's case, obviously, but it certainly made him someone that investigators wanted to talk to. Detective Wright eventually traveled to the Florida prison where Chino was serving his sentence to interview him face to face. One of the first things he wanted to know was if he knew Jennifer, specifically the work that he had done inside of her condo just a week before she disappeared. Detective Wright asked him if he remembered being inside Jennifer's unit. He asked, "How did you get inside?" Which Chino said she let us in. Everything was normal. There was nothing unusual about that day. He and other workers completed the job and they left. The detective then shifted the conversation to the surveillance photos. He placed the infamous images in front of Chino and he asked, "The person walking past the gate, is there any reason someone would look at those and think it's you?" Chino's answer was, "No, not really." As investigators continued evaluating him as a possible suspect, another detail stood out. Chino was approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall. The FBI and local investigators had consistently estimated that the person captured on the video footage was somewhere between 5'3" and 5'5". That's a little bit of a difference. I don't know if that really does it make a difference to you guys? Like, do you think?
At first, I would say, like, oh no, I don't think, like, you can get shit wrong. Don't get, like,
Mhm.
don't get me wrong. But I feel like that's a big enough difference measurement wise. Like if they
Mhm.
even if you have those camera stills and it's not a video and it's pictures, you go and measure exactly certain marks and stuff like that,
Mhm.
So like I feel like
Yeah.
it should be a range. I don't know. I feel like 5'9's a little bit out of
Yeah.
what that range would should could be, but
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Throughout the interview, Detective Wright described Chino as cooperative. He appeared familiar with Jennifer's case, he answered questions without hesitation, and firmly denied having anything to do with her disappearance. Then Chino agreed to do something that many suspects refuse. He volunteers to take a polygraph.
No.
Yes.
Hell.
According to investigators, he passes. Once again, detectives found themselves back where they had been so many times before, a promising lead that ultimately failed to move the investigation any closer to finding Jennifer. Even after Chino passed the polygraph, Detective Wright wasn't ready to completely eliminate him as a possibility. Wright re interviews another maintenance worker who had been inside Jennifer's condominium alongside Chino while repairs were being made just the week before she disappeared, and detectives wanted to know if anything stood out to him on that day. Did Jennifer seem nervous? Was there an argument? Did anyone behave strangely? According to the worker, no. He told detectives everything about the visit had been completely routine. Jennifer was friendly, the conversation was centered around the maintenance work that needed to be completed, and nothing about the interaction struck him as unusual. He also said he wasn't aware of anyone who had a problem with Jennifer. Once again, another lead seemed to be a dead end. As the investigation drug on, the momentum Detective Wright had built slowly faded. And then, in 2010, another setback. Detective Wright was reassigned and Jennifer's case was handed off once again. For the Kesse family, it felt like history was repeating itself. Year after year, they continued pushing for answers, but they increasingly felt as though Jennifer's investigation was just being pushed along. For several years, the family repeatedly asked the Orlando Police Department to officially classify Jennifer's disappearance as a cold case. It might sound strange, but the family wanted them to do that because cold cases, if you're classified as a cold case, you have more access to funding. Like there's more funding for cold cases versus just like cases that are just kind of sitting around in limbo, like Jennifer's case was. Like it's either hot or it's cold, you know? But hers was just like in the middle, just floating around. Each time the family asked, they received the same response. Police insisted that Jennifer's case was still considered active. The problem, according to her family, was it didn't feel active. From their perspective, very little was happening. Fed up, the family made a drastic move. They ended up suing the Orlando Police Department to get Jennifer's case files. I mean, it's pretty strange. And then in 2016, 10 years after she disappeared without a trace, the state of Florida officially declared Jennifer Kesse legally dead. For her family, it was a heartbreaking milestone, not because they believed Jennifer was gone, but because it was another painful reminder of just how much time had passed without answers. 2 years later, in 2018, Orlando appointed a new police chief, and his name is Orlando. So, Orlando police chief named Orlando.
Perfectly fitting.
Perfect. Although Orlando had not been involved in the original investigation, he publicly acknowledged the Kesse's family's frustration and he understood why they felt let down. After taking over as police chief, he made the decision that few people expected. He actually gave his investigators 6 months to conduct a refresh of Jennifer's case. And then after those 6 months, if there hadn't been any significant breakthroughs, he was going to make the decision to turn over all of their files to Jennifer's family.
Then they just would investigate
Can you do
themselves?
that?
I didn't think you could do that, but I
I
guess.
thought you were gonna say like FBI.
Yeah, no. They need to. Yeah, so the family sued for it. I guess that it didn't happen or the case was just like pending for years. If we don't have anything by this amount of time, you guys can just take it over. I guess they just have nothing to lose, you know? Chief Orlando said that after so many years spent trying to solve Jennifer's disappearance, he believed that it was time to honor the family's wishes. The Orlando Police Department handed everything over. More than 16,000 pages of investigative files, 67 hours of video, and audio recordings. It was one of the largest case files released that the department had ever made to a victim's family. Probably ever made to a victim's family, hopefully. And there was one condition. Once the records were released, the Orlando Police Department would no longer serve as the lead agency on Jennifer's case. Strange. For the first time since Jennifer disappeared, the investigation was largely in her family's hands. Determined to keep searching, the Kesse family hired a private investigator named Michael to take over where law enforcement had left off. His first assignment was reading every page, every report, every witness statement, lead, interview, the 16,000 pages, and that is exactly what he did. In fact, he said that he reviewed the entire case file at least 3 separate times, searching for overlooked details or investigative opportunities that may have slipped through the crack. So Michael returns to Jennifer's condominium complex. He knocks on the doors, he speaks with residents, and he retraces investigators' steps from 2016. So I'm sure this is hard because you're doing this way later. Those people probably don't still live there, but he is just putting forth the effort. And he actually does find one resident a woman named Colleen. She had moved into the complex about 2 years before Jennifer vanished because, like Jennifer, she believed that it was a safe place to live. But over time, that feeling began to change. She tells Michael as construction on the complex continued, workers started like living out of the vacant condominium units. And according to Colleen, groups of men would often gather outside after work and just like hang out. They didn't actually even live there. They're just like maintenance workers, but they're living in these like open like places on the complex that are just vacant. She said that they would be out drinking, making comments to girls as they walked by. She started complaining to the leasing office. The manager she recalled was sympathetic and apologized, but told her there wasn't anything he could do about the situation. Another resident was named Tammy, who asked that only her first name be used. Although Tammy moved into the complex years after Jennifer disappeared, she described experiences that also made her feel unsettling. She told investigators she began to notice strange things inside her apartment while she was away. She said that personal belongings seemed to have been moved. Her underwear drawer had been disturbed. She came home one day to find the shower wet, even though that she hadn't been inside of her complex. On another occasion, she noticed footprints inside of her closet. And then came the incident that she has never forgotten. According to her, she caught a man, someone believed to be one of the construction workers, hiding near her patio, and he was exposing himself while he was watching her. Experiences like these didn't prove that the workers were connected to Jennifer's disappearance, obviously, but it did paint a picture of an environment that wasn't as safe as everyone in the complex thought it was.
Hell no. The wet shower and the
Yeah.
footprints would have done it in for me right there. I would
Yeah.
absolutely like the man exposing himself outside, not as bad as the indoor stuff. Like I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I would rather have the dude
Honestly.
in my bushes than I would inside of my shower or footprints in my oh my God, I would move immediately.
If you moved one thing in my house, I would know.
Immediately.
I know exactly where everything's at.
Right.
According to Tammy, that man ran from her patio and sped away in a white van. She immediately reported it to police, but to this day, she said the man was never identified and neither was the white van that he was driving. As Michael continued interviewing former residents, one name kept surfacing: Chino. Again, another woman who asked to not be identified told the investigator that Chino frequently approached her in the parking lot when she came home late from work. She said the encounters made her uneasy, but not everyone described him that way. Another former resident who agreed to be identified only as Ashley had a completely different experience. She remembered that Chino was friendly, outgoing, easy to talk to. In fact, after Jennifer disappeared, Ashley says Chino came over to her condo fairly often. The two talked regularly. Oddly enough, Jennifer's disappearance never came up. Later, Ashley admitted that there was one question that she always wanted to ask him. You had keys to all of these apartments. What do you think happened to Jennifer? But he never answered. For months, nothing about Chino struck her as suspicious. Until one day, when he just simply disappeared. About 9 months after Jennifer disappeared, Ashley says that Chino abruptly moved out of the complex in the middle of the night without telling anyone. So, a little suspicious. She said it bothered her enough that she eventually called the crime line and reported what she knew. She gave a statement, but according to Ashley, no one ever followed up, of course. For the private investigator, these interviews weren't necessarily proof he was involved, they just painted a better picture. The uncomfortable encounters, the complaints, the atmosphere many residents described just raises new questions. And after hearing Chino's name again and again, Jennifer's family believed that it was time to speak with him once more. The last documented interview investigators conducted with Chino had been back in 2009, and more than a decade had passed. Their private investigator headed to Chino's last known address, hoping that he finally might get the chance to ask those questions himself. So, years later, spoiler alert, this case was covered on CBS. So, at that point, CBS news reporter that was covering Jennifer's case tracked Chino down himself and asked him directly about the allegations that had followed him for so many years. Before the reporter could get that far into the interview, Chino was adamant. He was innocent. He even took a lie detector test and he said, everyone knows that I had nothing to do with Jennifer's disappearance. So he's just standing firm, you know. So their investigator continues reviewing reports, revisiting old leads, and talking to anyone who might remember anything that investigators might have missed. However, nothing really pans out for him, unfortunately. And Jennifer's case is still completely unsolved, 15 years without any answers. But for Jennifer's family and closest friends, the woman that they were searching for was never just another missing person in this case. She was funny, quick-witted, confident, someone who knew exactly what she wanted out of life and who wasn't afraid to work for it. The people who loved Jennifer describe her as fiercely loyal, the kind of friend who would always show up when you needed her. And that's exactly why they refused to stop showing up for her. The family still believes that Jennifer may have been attacked within seconds of stepping outside her front door, overpowered, and then pulled into a vacant apartment across the breezeway before anyone realized what was happening. Again, there's no evidence proving that that's what happened. It is simply the best scenario that fits the evidence as they see it. For years, Jennifer's family felt like the investigation had stalled. They spent nearly 2 decades fighting to keep her story alive, often feeling like they were carrying the investigation themselves, because they were. But in 2022, something changed. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, better known as FDLE, officially took over Jennifer's case. Rather than simply reviewing old investigations, they essentially started from scratch. Detectives began re-interviewing witnesses, revisiting thousands of pages of reports, and re-examining physical evidence using forensic technology that simply didn't exist back in 2006. According to Jennifer's family, investigators have now interviewed dozens of people all over again, looking at the case with fresh eyes. One of the biggest developments came in late 2025 when Jennifer's father, Drew, revealed that investigators had identified DNA evidence that either couldn't be fully analyzed or wasn't analyzed with the technology available nearly 20 years ago. Today, that evidence is being tested using modern forensic techniques. Investigators have also said that they're using newer technology, including artificial intelligence, to re-examine the evidence, like the surveillance footage that has haunted this case from the very beginning. To be clear, they have not announced that they're close to identifying the person seen parking Jennifer's car, but they do believe that today's technology may uncover details that simply weren't possible to detect back then. Perhaps the most encouraging update came when FDLE publicly announced that Jennifer's case was no longer considered a cold case. Investigators have said that the investigation is active and that they have narrowed their focus to a small number of persons of interest. They have not publicly identified those individuals, and no arrests have been made. Jennifer's father said that that is the most helpful that he has felt in years. After nearly 2 decades of unanswered questions, he believes investigators may finally be closer than ever before to learning what happened to his daughter. As of today, Jennifer Kesse has not been found. The identity of the person seen abandoning her car remains unknown, and no one has been charged. But for the first time in a long time, there is genuine momentum in this investigation. Someone knows what happened to Jennifer. Maybe it's someone who has stayed silent out of fear. Maybe it's someone who thinks the truth has been buried by time. Or maybe it's someone who has convinced himself that after all these years, it's no longer matters. But it does. And Jennifer was only 24 years old. She walked out the door on what should have been an ordinary Monday morning, and she was never seen again. And that is Jennifer Kesse's case.
What a case. How sad. Okay, do we think he did it?
Chino?
Yeah.
I don't, the height thing, but then he does have a history of assaulting women.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's hard to say because it's like that's the only name we have.
There's literally nothing else. It's so frustrating.
It literally could be anybody, but not Chino. I don't know. Do they know for sure that it's even a man?
Not for sure.
I mean, 5'3", 5'5", not many men that short.
I was thinking that too. I wonder if it was a woman.
We'll see you next week for another case. Please like, subscribe, all the things. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.